Hello and welcome to PRZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm delighted to be joined today by Robbie Neilson. Robbie, how are you getting on?
I'm great, thanks. Good to be back in the sunshine for a couple of days and it's rained, so great to be back in Scotland.
You seem to have brought a little bit of the rain back with you.
Yes, I know, so it's need to get back used to it again after Tampa.
You have, of course, as you mentioned there, been in Florida. How do you reflect on your time out there?
It was a brilliant experience, to be honest. I fancied trying something new. The offer came up and I spoke to them and went out and just being in a different country, different culture as well, and dealing with different players as well. It's something I wanted to try and kind of push myself and develop a wee bit, and I certainly did that.
Was it just a case of when it came up, I want to go and experience something in a completely different part of the world?
I did that as well as a player. I was at Hearts for a number of years as a player and I got the opportunity to move down to England, and I wanted to try something different, and it's the same as a manager. I'd done a number of years in Scotland, a few clubs I'd done in England, and this opportunity came up to try something different. I think it's important you always try and push yourself. So going out there was like a total culture shock, and I didn't know anybody, didn't take any staff with me, and it was like go there and see what it's like. And some of it was really good, some of it was a wee bit difficult to deal with at times, but ultimately the whole experience was great.
Was it nice just to get out of the spotlight of Scotland for a little bit?
It was more so just to try something different. I think when you're dealing with a kind of Scottish dressing room, it's very much, it's a British kind of European dressing room, but when you go over there, it's very multicultural. We had a big South American group, we had Central Americans, we had some Africans, Europeans, we had American guys that had come through the professional ranks, some through the college ranks, we had Australian as well. So it was really different cultures and different groups, so it was really good to kind of experience that and how you deal with them.
I heard that it wasn't without its challenges, specifically the weather. You had to deal with a hurricane over there that displaced you from your stadium.
So that was probably the toughest part of it, to be honest with you. So we obviously there you get the humidity and the temperature, which is really difficult. You're playing, when you play all over the country, we went to Phoenix with 107 degrees at game time, and then we went up to Colorado, you're 6,500 feet. So the away games are very, very tough with the travel as well. You can be travelling west coast for 10 days. But the big thing was that we had two hurricanes actually back to back, and it was the first time that the Tampa had been hit for 20 years. So we had an issue with the stadium. It was next to the sea, so that got flooded and it was off limits for 7 months. So we played, I think, the last 14 games away from home. So that was very, very tough. But it's, again, in an experience you kind of develop from that. How do you deal with it? So we had to change a lot of travel plans. Obviously, how we prepare for games, how we recover from games was difficult.
I think people should remember that next time they moan about waterlogged pitches in Scotland.
So it's like when you go through a hurricane, it's different. We actually we got evacuated for a week down to the other side of Florida. When you're over there, you don't know what you're going to come back to. The place where I was, my island I was on an island and it was under like 6 foot of water, the whole island. The stadium was under 9 feet. The baseball stadium that we were owned by the Tampa Bay Rowdies, their roof get ripped off the whole stadium. Wow. So again, I think that's getting another year before it's redeveloped, if it does get redeveloped. So it was certainly an experience, that's for sure.
I suppose you're dealing with the emotional side of that with the players as well. If this is their home, the whole place is torn apart.
Super. That was very, very difficult, to be honest, because obviously the club were fantastic from that side of it because they evacuated everyone out. So we had obviously the players went, their families went, the staff all went, or the pets all went as well. Yeah. We all moved over to the far side of Florida to get away from the hurricane path, and then obviously a lot of them had issues when they came back with their housing. Some of them had trees through their roofs, roofs off and things like that. So it was a difficult period. Yep.
You are back. You've made it back in one piece. Does that mean that we might see you back in Scottish football sometime soon?
But I'm open to kind of anything at the moment. I really enjoy my time abroad, but one of the things I missed about it over there was the intensity of the game here and the passion about the game. I think over there it's still developing as a sport, but you're behind American football, baseball, basketball, ice hockey, so you don't really have that passion. And so I'm hoping to get back over here and get a club and try and get that passion back again.
It's safe to say you want back in?
Yeah, definitely. I've been out now for 6 weeks, but I'm ready to get back in and just look for something that's interesting.
Your name seems to be one of these names that always ends up on the bookies shortlist for every job that seems to come up recently. Has there been any sort of formal contact with anyone?
Not at the moment, no. Obviously there's a few jobs come up, but nobody's approached me on that side of things, so we'll just wait and see what happens. You have these wee periods in football, especially as a manager, have that kind of end of the season till the start of pre-season where there's movement, and then the next one will probably be September, October. So I'd really like to get in just now because I think you get that opportunity to, firstly, to recruit players, and then secondly to do a pre-season, actually build it, because if you wait later in the year, you're generally taking over somewhere that probably is having a difficult period and the players are already there and it's just kind of firefighting to the window.
Managers always speak about that, the importance of having a pre-season. Just how much of a difference can that make to an outsider looking in?
Oh, it's massive, to be honest with you. Because you actually get a chance to recruit the players that you want to the style you want. Then you get a chance to work with them for 4, 5, 6 weeks and then start developing through the season. When you go into a season, if it's September, October, you take over like I've done a couple of times, it's more difficult because firstly they're not the players you brought in. You generally have to change the style of play a little bit because the previous one's probably not worked. And then you're working to get to the window to try and make a couple of changes to get at the end of the season.
It is something of a perilous situation for managers these days. We see how many come and go. The Scottish managerial merry-go-round is in full swing this summer. Is that something that maybe concerns you as a coach if you're looking to get back in? Yeah,
obviously it's just the nature of life nowadays, to be honest with you. It's not just in football. I think we're probably more visible in the media spotlight, but you look at CEOs and guys in C-level positions, very few people stay in one role for or one company for 40 years. People move about, and it's just the way it is. A lot of the time you have 2 or 3 years at a club and it's time for a change, and that's just the nature of the beast. So you have to make sure when you get in there you hit the ground running and then try and build the club as well as you can. Your objective is to, when you do finally leave, that you left it in a better position.
Do you think that maybe perhaps in Scotland, because it's a league and it's a country so dominant of one, maybe 2 teams if you're including Rangers in that now, Celtic having won so much, is there unrealistic expectation from other fans of other clubs?
I think it's because everyone's there's probably 3 or 4 clubs below Rangers and Celtic that are all vying for that top 6 position, and then everyone else thinks they can get into the top 6, so there's always that constant competition to try and get into it, and there's not a clear divide between all the teams. So it's just the way the league's set up. I think if it does go to a bigger league like we always talk about, but it never happens, it might give you that opportunity to be in these areas where you can actually develop the team and then build for the next season.
If we look back at your last job here in Scotland, when you left Hearts, you of course had success with them, reaching cup finals, promotion. You left when they were 4th in the table. When you look back on that now, do you feel like that was a hasty decision? Do you feel any bad feeling towards that?
No, not at all. It's just like I spoke about it. It's part of the game. If you want to be in football management, you have to accept that these decisions will come. And when I look back on it, we took over when they get demoted into the Championship, got them promoted, got European football, couple of Scottish Cup finals, and left in 4th place. So the club is went on, and then the club decided they want to bring someone in to try and push again, and whether it works or not, it's entirely up to them. But from my perspective, it was a fantastic experience, both times as a head coach and my time as a player. So no, I just think it's you have to look at it and learn from it and go right on to the next one.
I think sometimes you can maybe from the outside look at fans and think maybe be careful what you wish for sometimes if you're having relative success, but fans just maybe want to change and just try something different for the sake of it.
But I think that's the nature of life nowadays as well. It's always about change. You look at even I talk about it, my kids with the fashion industry. Years ago you would buy a t-shirt and you would keep it for 2 years.
Yeah.
Nowadays you buy a t-shirt and you keep it for 2 weeks. So it's always continually changing. People want change, and I think years ago managers would get 4, 5, 6 years. Potentially even longer. Nowadays you're getting 6 months, a year. If you make it to 2.5, 3 years, you've done exceptionally well. So I think it's just the nature of life.
I guess that's not a problem per se unique to Scotland. You look at Ange Postecoglou, for example, a guy you managed against when his time here. He goes down to Tottenham, he wins a European Cup, and still fans are saying that's not good enough.
Yeah, I think it's, I actually think the English leagues, especially with the Premier League, but when you go into kind of Champions League, Chip League 1, League 2, where I've been, it's probably the timescale of managers even less. Whereas up here we're a little bit more stable, I think, in my opinion. That's why I think it's a good place to coach and manage, because you get a bit of time.
If we look at Hearts, the team maybe synonymous with Robbie Neilson. I don't know if that's unfair to say. It's a time of transition. It's an exciting time for the club. How do you see this Tony Bloom revolution? If you want
I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think I was actually over in Union St Gilloise a couple of weeks ago visiting Arnold Gym. And obviously they've just won the title. They took them from the league below, and now they've won the title there in the Champions League. So, and I think that if Hearts or any club has an aspiration to try and challenge the Old Firm and take over the Old Firm, they have to kind of look outside the box a little bit. You can't do it just the way we've been trying to do it for the last 40 years. You know, so I think looking at that, they've obviously got the analytical side of things, which has been hugely successful in Belgium and doing at Brighton as well. You know, to then take that to Hearts and then getting Derek in, which I think is a great appointment, because Derek will bring the understanding of what is needed within Scottish football, because it is a kind of unique league. You know, it is the physicality of it, the transitional side of it. You know, so a lot of players, when you bring them in for the continent, they find it really hard to kind of adapt to the style of play here. Yeah. But Derek will have that experience to potentially help with the recruitment side of it, but also when they come in to try and coach the players. So, you know, if they're going to try and challenge, then you've got to think outside the box. And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, then at least they've given it a go. You just stole my next question there, talking about Derek McInnes. It seems like a good fit for Hearts. Yeah, I think like when you look about and what you need, you know, you need Premier League experience. Derek's obviously had that for a number of years, did fantastically well at Aberdeen, went to Kilmarnock, did really well, dealt with players, progressed both clubs massively. You know, and if you're going to bring in, you know, an analytical company that's going to come and help, you know, if you bring in someone maybe that doesn't know the league either, it can be very difficult. So having Derek in there with his experience, I think it'll be interesting. You know, it'll be interesting, and I hope they do well. You look at Derek combined with Tony Bloom, combined with the potential money that he puts into the club. What can Hearts achieve in that? Is it just a case of Derek said in his first press conference, I want to win trophies, I want to win silverware? Is that where they should be aiming? I think, you know, no matter who's at Hearts, that's what you're always aiming for, you know what I mean? So I don't think that'll ever change. You just wonder if this will give them a better opportunity to go and do it. So, look, it's very early days within it. We know what football's like. Yeah. It can be erratic. You know, I think that it's, I just hope that they get time to go and try it. You've obviously been at the coalface with Hearts, both as a player and a manager. Can you try and take us inside the expectation at that club, what it means to play there and what the fans expect from a Hearts team as a manager and as a player? Well, firstly, it's a fantastic place to play and manage. You know, the pressure is there, and it's one of the things I really missed when I was over in America, because you don't have that. You don't have the build up to the game and intensity. You don't have the intensity of the stadium and the stand and the pressures and the joy when you win and the you know, the sadness when you get beat. You know, because people's lives, you know, are at times dependent on it. You know, and it makes their whole week. So, you know, it's a fantastic place to be. I think, like, whenever I was trying to recruit players, a lot of it is the kind of psychological side of it. Can you handle the intensity of it? Because I signed a number of players that could, but some players that couldn't. You know, and it's just when they go out there, can they take the pressure of expectations to win every single week, which is always there at Hearts, and then the pressure of 20,000 people there demanding success. We were talking a little bit off camera about the use of data and this and sort of taking over the game on laptops. A lot of managers nowadays speak about how difficult it is. You can look at a player's numbers, you can see how many goals a player scores, you see how many crosses a player puts in. You can't put on a laptop how a player is going to deal with pressure. It's interesting that, because, you know, obviously AI is coming into the game, and it's something that they're trying to look at now. They're tracking body language as well as one of the things they're looking at, you know, which is a big part of it, which kind of shows you a little bit about the player's character. You know, how do they respond to, you know, things that go against the team, that for themselves, players with them and things like that. So I think it's developing more and more, but I do think you still need that, you know, kind of personal interaction with the player. You know, you need to be able to talk to them, because ultimately it comes down to relationships. When you're a head coach, you have to have a relationship with all the players, and that relationship can be a little bit different player to player, but you have to have it. So you have to get that connection prior to the signing. So, you know, I think most clubs, you know, it's not a direct, there's the player, it's there's the player, have a chat with him. Yeah. If it goes well, then we can bring him in. If it doesn't go well, then we'll move to the next one. Interesting you mentioned the sort of AI side of things. Is that something that you, as a young coach, are now adapting yourself to and go, okay, I need to keep up with the modern trends that are changing here? It's massive nowadays. You know, the analytical companies are huge. You know, I was using over in America a company called Impact, which was looking at packing zones and how you play through, and giving, you know, it just gives you a different look at the game, you know, a perspective of it, you know, because a lot of the time you can get biased by your perception of what a player should be like and what a game should be like, you know, but when you actually take that context away and you look at it purely from a data point of view, it gives you a different idea of the game. So, you know, it's huge in the game now, and it's something that as coaches you have to continue to, you know, adapt yourself and learn. Cards on the table, you look at Scotland. Do you think a system like that will ever have enough to overthrow the old firm? I hope it does. It'll be very, very difficult, because I think that obviously the financial divide between especially Celtic and Rangers and everyone else is so vast that it makes it very difficult. But when you look at over in Belgium, when you had the likes of Club Brugge, Anderlecht were always dominant within that league, and then Union Saint-Gilloise have managed to get themselves in and then above them. It is possible. I don't know what the divide prior to that was within the league, you know, because I think like, here we're talking 10, 12, 15 times the budget and the turnover, you know, but it's a big way to go, but there's only one way to try and do it, and that's to try something different.
We talk about coaching, coming back into the country. I don't know if I want to give you this tag of, you seem to be a bit of a specialist at getting teams out of the Championship. You've done it with Hearts twice, done it with Dundee United. Is that a route you'd maybe want to look at as your next step?
Potentially, you know what I mean? I'm kind of open to anything, you know, like at the moment, obviously, the Premiership in Scotland is abroad, there's a couple of interests down in England as well, you know, so, but the Championship is a league obviously I know very well, having get promoted 3 times out of it. So, you know, at this moment in time for me, it's just like, is it a club that wants to speak to me? And if we speak, then is it something that we'd like to do together? Because again, I think it comes down to the relationship with, you know, the one with the players, which comes eventually, but the biggest relationship is between the sporting director and CEO, depending on the structure. And you have to get that feel for the club and say, like, what do we want to do? Does your vision match my vision? And then if we do that, how are we going to do it?
If we just stay on Hearts currently, Lawrence Shankland, he's a player that you've had a relationship with as a manager. How important for Hearts is it to try and keep him?
I think it's vitally important. You know, obviously, I signed Lawrence when he was at A United to Dundee United, and he was phenomenal with us. Yep. Sold him over to Beerschot in Belgium, and then obviously I moved to Hearts, and we were looking for a striker, and I pushed really hard to get him. You know, initially the club wanted to do it. You know, they didn't think it was the right profile, but I just felt that, you know, when you get somebody that can score goals, it doesn't really matter, you know, what level they're playing at that moment, what their form is. If you can get them into the penalty box, and Lawrence is a guy that, you know, if you can get him in there, he will score goals, and he's still one of the best in the league at doing that. He's
obviously had a bit of a tricky season this season, but is it just a case of that can happen for strikers? He definitely does have that quality.
I think it's more like that, you know, I'll be honest, I didn't watch a lot of the games, but I know what Lawrence is like, and Lawrence is a guy that you have to get him into the penalty area. Yeah. You know, so you have to play in a team that builds to get him there. Now, he's not a guy that will take you there himself a lot of the time. His link-up play is good, but he won't take you in there. So I think that, you know, if you don't build a team and form a style of play to get him in there, then it's difficult for him to score goals, ultimately. So, you know, I think, you know, previously with Hearts, we had a team that would get him into the box and he would score, and I think probably last season maybe they weren't allowing him to get into that area.
We look at one of your old teammates as well, Craig Gordon, who still pulling on the gloves. He's just recently signed a new contract with Hearts that's going to take him past his 43rd birthday. Could you ever imagine him still playing at that age?
To be honest, it's absolutely phenomenal. You know, I know Craig obviously from a long time. He was in the youth setup just underneath me, a couple of years below, and like, you know, he came into the first team, obviously. Unbelievable period he had. He was one of the top goalkeepers in Britain, and he's moved down south. And I think like potentially that period where he was out the game gave him maybe that refresh, you know. And then he obviously came back, did great for us at Hearts. He was outstanding again. And had another little injury, and it gave him a wee break. So now he's like, you know, he's almost like Peter Pan, isn't he? He's continually going. It's phenomenal. And like, I think everyone always says, like, keep playing for as long as you can, because once you stop playing, you miss it so much. And you can coach and manage, but it's not the same. So, you know, I hope he's got another couple of years under him, and maybe some internationals. Obviously get a World Cup coming up, you know, if we qualify for that, it's a chance to go there. So he'll have these internal motivations that keep him going.
Did you always think that when he was breaking through? I think you're maybe 2 years older than him. When he was coming through into that Hearts team, you went, this boy's special?
To be honest, when he first came in at like 16, 17, he was only probably, I don't know, maybe 5'8", 5'9", so he was always quite small. He was obviously a very late developer. You know, he was quite a quiet lad, but he was very, you know, he worked extremely hard. You know, he had a good mindset. He was quite a quiet lad, but he kept working away. And then it was kind of crazy over the space. I think a summer he grew about 4 or 5 inches. You know, and then he just totally kicked on from there. And there was a period where we had Anthony Niemi on one end. We were playing 5-a-sides, and we had Craig Gordon on the other end at 5-a-sides, and like it was always 0-0 because nobody could score. It was like world-class goalkeeper against world-class goalkeeper. It was phenomenal, you know. And then obviously Anthony left to go to Southampton. I think Craig took over, and we went through a period where, like, you know, you didn't expect to ever lose a goal, you know. And it was that phenomenal period he had.
How good is he in the great pantheon of Scottish goalkeepers? Is he right up there?
I think he is, yeah. I think obviously, like, you know, you've got Jim Leighton and guys like that, you've got Andy Gorham, all these kind of guys, there's a number of them in there, you know, but Craig's definitely up at that top level. You know, I think.
Alan Ruffy.
Ruffy, man, sorry, Ruffy, aye, sorry, mate, the old Partick legend. But I think that he's definitely in that higher echelons of it. You know, I mean, it's difficult to say because, like, you know, I think if he'd went down to Sunderland, maybe had a longer career down there, but had that wee period was out. But actual longevity of career has been phenomenal.
If I take you back a little bit to your playing career, what we've seen this week, Aberdeen winning the Scottish Cup, take you back to 2000 and 2006. Those scenes, did they take you back to that, just seeing the full half of the stadium decked out in maroon and red?
It's phenomenal, you know. It's like the bus parade after it and things like that. You know, you don't, obviously with Rangers and Celtic, you don't get that with the city, the makeup of the city. So when another team wins it, whether it's Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, you see it and it brings you back to the parade we had, you know. And when you're a young kid, you know, you want to play for Scotland and you want to win a cup, the Scottish Cup, you know. So for these guys to do it's phenomenal.
How much is it that? How much does it mean to these other teams outside Rangers and Celtic to pick up these trophies? I was speaking to one of my colleagues, he's an Aberdeen fan in his early 20s. He said it's the best day of his life, and it sums up what it means to the.
Yeah, it's huge because obviously with the dominance of the Old Firm nowadays in the league, it's very, very, very difficult to challenge over the course of 38 games to win that. So your realistic way of winning a cup is through winning a trophy, where it's through the cup competitions, and again that is difficult because of the dominance of the two Old Firm teams, especially Celtic in recent years, you know. So to try and get one of these is huge for clubs, you know, because everyone else is fighting for it.
Yeah, you spoke about the trophy parade there. That's something these players will remember for the rest
of
their life.
It's phenomenal, you know. I think we did it. I kind of was running about it in '98, you know. I wasn't in the team or in the squad, but we were there as young kids, and you see the passion there, and then to actually do it as a player was fantastic.
Brilliant, Robbie. Just before we leave, I always ask two questions to every guest that I ever interview. Who is the best player that you've played alongside, and who is the hardest player you've ever played against?
I probably Fletcher, Man United, when I was in Scotland. It's not top level, real top level, midfielder wise. Hardest one I played against? Shevchenko, probably.
Wow.
I think probably that one would be Ronaldinho. Probably Shevchenko, I would think was the toughest one.
I can imagine facing up against Ronaldinho as a fullback must be quite something.
It was, yeah, tried to get him over the side most of the time.
Yes, hit him with a tackle early.
Exactly.
Robbie, thanks very much, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers. Good man.